Yep, we're up.
All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Just Add Bourbon podcast live feed on Facebook. My name is Jimmy Don Kerr,
I'm Eric Beaudry.
And I'm JD Darren.
and we have a really special guest with us tonight, fellow Kentuckian Gary Ervin. Gary, thanks for coming on with us.
Thanks for inviting me, guys.
So, Gary, I start all my interviews out pretty much the same. You being a fellow Kentuckian, the primary question is this: cats or cards?
Got two sons that graduated UK, and I'm a wrestler, so not real crazy about the basketball in the first place. I'm never shot. I can't do anything with balls. Kind of wrestling area sometimes it gets involved, but I'm probably going to lean toward the cats.
All right. Well, all right, JD and Eric, interview can continue then. If you had said cards, I was just going to stop, as you can see probably behind me.
Yeah, over your shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah.
I told Jimmy Don before you come on, I was like, he's not going to care less about Kentucky or Louisville. I can tell you right.
Yeah.
He's a wrestler. He can care less.
Back when the Carboys used to have a program there, I did.
Yeah.
So Gary has lived what I would call a very adventurous life. I was doing a little reading about you today, Gary, and it looks like you've done a little bit of everything maybe in your life. Worked in the coal mines, was a lineman maybe for a cable company, started your own cable company, sold out to that, and then was on the Amazing Race with your daughter, as well as you're an avid mountain climber and have actually climbed Mount Everest. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been on Everest. In fact, this is the first year in 6 years that I haven't been climbing a mountain in the Himalayas. And Everest, I tried it the first time in 2016. Second time, I finally summited in 2018. My first expedition had 6 people die along the way. We ended up on the 300 feet from the summit. I had to leave the rest of the party that ended up dying up there. So Everest is kind of, it's a beautiful place, and I had to go back and just see what that last 300 feet was about.
Oh, absolutely. So really, you were 300 feet from the summit and then had to stop.
Yeah, it was a funny story. It was just a surreal night. We were running across these people that were out the day before, and they were stuck on the fixed ropes, hands frozen and immobile. And I ended up climbing around them. I get to a point where I catch up with our strongest climber, and he kind of opened my eyes. I was looking for the top, and he said, Gary, I'm pretty sure we can make it to the top. He said, I'm just not sure I can make it back. And he said, I don't want to end up like those guys that they're stuck on the ropes below us. And it opened my eyes. I climbed these mountains to come back home to my family, and I promised my wife and kids that's what I'd do. So I turned around and made it back, not in real good shape, but made it back through a terrible snowstorm, and ended up coming off the mountain safe. It took me, tell everybody, it took me, had some pretty bad frostbite on my face and toes, and my kidneys quit functioning. I lost 40 pounds, and you lose so much protein, it shut my kidneys down. And I tell everybody, it took me 6 months to get the feeling in my feet and toes, and 2 weeks to get my kidneys to start working again. And it took me a year to get my wife to convince that I can go back again at 18. So
yeah, and then you went back. Awesome.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: like, what drove you to want to conquer these mountains, or even get into climbing in the first place? Like, what was the ignition start? What was the ignition point for that?
It's hard. It's easy to describe the pain. It's cold as heck, and the food's terrible. It's miserable conditions. It's easy to describe all that. What's hard to describe is the beauty and the power that I see on this mountain. And it's just something that called to me. I climbed Kilimanjaro in 2014. I took my 2 sons with me, and kind of as one of them graduated UK, another one graduated high school and was getting ready to go to UK, and it was a kind of a father and son trip, and we were going to spend 3 weeks, and we would climb Kilimanjaro and scuba dive and go on safari, and it called to me. It was something that I did that just I couldn't get enough of, and every time I get off of one mountain, I'd be planning the next climb, and the majority of them I do by myself. I don't have, if I do have a Sherpa or somebody that usually can't speak English, and it's hard to describe. I climbed for 2 years, and I asked myself that same question: why do I do stuff? Why am I doing this? And why do I like it so much? And I tell everybody, if you want to figure out how you're going to do something, how I'm going to quit smoking, you got to figure out why you want to do it, and how I'm going to climb Mount Everest. I had to figure out why, and it's a complicated answer.
So, Gary, I got a question for you. I've been a hiker for about 2 years now, and it's I can identify with a lot of what you're saying. Because I started hiking with my wife at first, and I really didn't like it, and then something in me just kind of clicked, and I was hooked. And I'd like to know, when exactly for you, when did hiking and climbing mountains kind of just click? Because, and I have a follow-up question after that.
Okay, it was probably the first one I climbed. I grew up on a farm. I always loved to be in the woods. I was a lineman, so I climbed poles for years. I climbed 500-foot towers, changing light bulbs. So I was fairly athletic and could climb, but it's just the feeling I get. I train once a month in Colorado, and it's something that I can go when I'm by myself. I don't see anybody for a week at a time, and I just climb. I just go from one trail to the next, and I support myself. Every 2 or 3 days, I'll find a hotel and get a shower and eat something. And but it's something that calls to you. It's hard to explain why, but it's something I can do, and I could do it full time if my wife would let me.
I know the feeling. So, just a follow-up question. The first mountain you ever climbed, I know that you had said in an article I read about you that being at the top of a mountain makes you feel extremely small. But one of the feelings that I experienced when I climbed my very first mountain was, just being that high in the air just brought me so much closer to God, and just the spiritualness of it. It's just so exhilarating to be standing at the top of the world. Do you feel that same way?
My very first post. So in 18 is when I summited. My first grandson was born, and I was really in the doghouse because I scheduled this $80,000, and they said, "Well, you're going to cancel it, surely, aren't you?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I love you, but I can't cancel this." So I felt a terrible sense of guilt, and so I started writing lessons to my grandkids. And if you read my blog, that's been kind of my mission the last 4 years, and is documenting what I've learned from the mountain and what I've learned about myself, and passing it on to my grandkids. And my very first lesson is, if you don't believe in God, go climb a mountain. It's the holiest place I've ever been. More holy than any church I've ever attended. There's something that the spirit of that mountain just grabs you. So it's hard. It's about like, why do you want to do that? It's difficult, but it's just something that it tugs at you that I can't explain.
I remember President Kennedy once said, and I'm going to paraphrase, we don't do certain things because they're easy, but we do them because they are hard.
Yeah.
And that's just the vibe I get.
Oh, and the thing about it, I'm not that emotional, but I cried like a baby every mountain I've ever summited. Yeah. So, it's an emotional, you spend Everest expeditions 2 months. You spend 2 months for 20 minutes on the top of a mountain, and Everest, I didn't cry until I got back to base camp because eight out of 10 people
Yeah.
die on the way down. So
Yeah.
I knew I had 3 bad days still to go.
So I got one more question, a follow-up question, guys, and I'm sorry, I'll stop hogging. So I know you spent 20 minutes up on the summit. So the first question is, what was the most memorable moment of being at the top of Everest? And the second question is, who was the rock for that you got?
You've read about the rock, huh?
Yeah, I've heard about the rock. How's your foot?
Yeah. I'm a pilot, and I fly corporate, and I fly my own plane. But my full-time pilot, asked me to bring a rock off the top of it, and so I get up there, and it's 35 below zero. The wind's just starting picking up, feeling good. Knew that I had to start turning around. I see a pile of rocks over there, and I got these big like catcher's mitts on, and I kind of scoop up a handful of gravel in one hand, and my zippers are all frozen on my jacket. I can't get into pockets. I got this big old Pillsbury Doughboy suit on. So I had a bright idea as I was going to dump them down the front of my down suit. Well, when I grabbed my down suit, I grabbed my long underwear too, and ended up dumping a handful of gravel straight down my stomach, inside my long underwear. So that's where I got it. And then, what I thought when I got to the top of it, you dream about it for 2 months. And when I got to the top of it, all I could think of was kind of what Hillary said. He said, I look up and see nothing. I look down and see the world. And, that came to me. And, it's just one of those, I just sat there and I was numb. I sat there with one leg in China and one leg in Nepal. And just I knew I had 20 minutes. And I just knew I wanted to be present for that 20 minutes. And I just didn't think of a lot. I tried to get my picture to get my summit certification. So I had to get my oxygen mask off and my goggles off so they could see my face. And it just, after that, it was just time to go down. It was a long, dangerous trek back down. And then I got back to work as far as getting down safely.
God bless you, brother.
Yeah.
I'll let the other guys take the floor now.
Okay.
Well, no, and I have a question. It's probably kind of a stupid question, but I think to try to help for people who are trying to relate what it's like to climb Mount Everest or any mountain for that matter, probably the most where we would get our understandings from watching a movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of shows what the trek is like. And so my question is it worse than what the movies, kind of portray, or is it better? I mean, of course, the movies are there to be dramatic and all that, but does it really take 2 months to make the climb, and kind of what's the climb like?
And, the climb split up into kind of 2 parts. One is you got about a 30-mile hike in, 38 miles, beautiful valley, the Kumba Valley. And then you get to the ice falls. And then from the ice falls up is another month. And it's where the technical part of the climb was. And the movie Everest, the guy who that was written about is a venture consultant, Rob Hall, and that's who I climbed with. My guide in Everest in 18 was Angdorji. He was Rob Hall's Sherpa. So those guys have Angdorji's summited it 22 times. And, I've climbed them, and I told my wife in 16, I said, well, we got better weather than they did in 96 forecasting. And, that stuff can't happen. We would turn around, their leadership's better. And in 2016, I get caught in a storm at the top, and it's pretty much like Everest. I'm hanging on. I'm trying to pull ropes out of the snow and climbing over dead bodies, and it was pretty brutal. And that was probably the one time that I was afraid. And I was where most of the people died on that show was about 200, 300 yards from the tent. And what happens is you go down, and gravity can drag you down. You're tied to this rope, and you're sliding and falling down the mountain. And then you get to the base, and it's flat. You got to go 200 yards, 300 yards into your tents. Well, it was a blinding whiteout. I couldn't see anything. and I could, every once in a while there'd be a stake that would mark a trail, or be a break in the snow, and I would crawl 50 feet to the next step, and I'd sit there and I'd wait until I could get another marker or something. And you know, I called my wife, and thank God I did at that time. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and she'd already been called by the news channel saying that there was 5 people that died on Everest, and
Oh, wow.
have they heard from me yet? So she was a nervous wreck, and that was probably, you know, I say that it's probably the closest. I was on Island Peak last year and had an hemorrhage. I had an aneurysm, and ended up having to get life flighted off of Island Peak. But above 23,000 feet is called, and above 26,000 is called the death zone. The helicopter is not going to save you. They're not going to bring your body down. So when you're up there, you're without a net. You're on your high rock wire without a net. Any mistakes you make up there are fatal. So you got to really focus and be even more cautious of your decisions and what you do in that zone. So
I want to get more into your preparation for going to Mount Everest. Like, how do you know you're in the shape? Like, is there like, how do you know you're ready to take on Everest? I guess is the thing, you know.
Yeah,
Things like that.
Well, and it's that's a great question, because 2 things. One is I'm 62. The average expedition age is in their 30s, 40s, are old, and most of the time I'm the old guy. So to get on an Everest expedition, you got to have experience on glacier climbing. So you got to be able to run crampons and ice axes and know your fixed ropes real well with Jumars. And then you got to have experience above 7,000 meters. So not only do you got to pay a bunch of money to go on an expedition, they got to tell you can join them. So the good ones will reject people that aren't that don't meet their standards. So I did Aconcagua, the 7,000 meters and highest point in South America. I climbed in Russia in the Caucasus Mountains and done a lot of glacier work. And I went to Adventure Consultants. They said, well, you got to sign up for this trainer. It's called Uphill Athlete. And you got to go through their program for 6 months before we'll accept you on the expedition. So, and plus send me a whole pile of money. So that's what I did. And the training was different. It was, you know, I'm training now. My final one's Denali, and it's carrying a lot of weight, but Everest was fixed ropes, a lot of upper body, a lot of cramponing, and then just to get used to, you know, 7,500 meters with no oxygen, it takes a lot of time to get to that altitude. So you know, you physically you got to train yourself. Mentally, you got to be ready for it. Technically, you got to be ready for it. So it's a combination of those 3 things to really prepare. It's 3 to 6 hours a day. On weekends, I would walk or trek for 5 to 9 hours. So it's a pretty big commitment as far as time goes, and but it's just one that I felt and still feel is worth it.
Well, Eric, you had a question?
Yeah, I remember you had gone out to Kathmandu prior to the Everest hike to orient yourself to the landscape and things like that. You did I wasn't sure if it was 1 or 2 18,000 foot crests.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so comparing to the actual training of an 18,000 foot crest versus a 23,000 foot crest, because and I'll ask you another question later about marathoning. Doing a 20-mile run versus the 26-mile run is a completely different story, because after 20 miles you hit that wall.
Yeah.
What's the difference between like 18,000 and 23,000?
It's pretty big. It's especially above 7,000 meters. That's where you've got 1/3 of the oxygen at 26,000 feet as you do at sea level. So So you end up moving. You take one step and you breathe 5 times. You end up moving like a snail up there, and there's just it's just a rhythm that you've got to get into. And 18,000, I can't say I can run up them, but I did two 16,000 foot mountains last year. Went to Antarctica and climbed Mount Vincent, and it was 16 and change. And then my most recent climb was in Indonesia this past winter. I climbed Carson's Pyramid, and it was a 16,000 foot technical rock climb. And I actually flew a helicopter in to base camp, and I had to climb that in one day. So, and I can do that and not get sick. But if I go above 18,000, I'm going to get sick, and I'll get high altitude sickness. I've had pulmonary edema before, where my lungs started filling with fluid in 17, where I had to hurry up and then get flown to a lower altitude to recover. I've had my voice is hoarse. I froze my larynx. I froze my pharynx. I froze that little flipper thing in the back of your throat. It looked like a cherry hanging down.
Uvula?
Yeah. And so I breathe hard when I go up there, and when it's 30 below zero, it does some damage to your vocal cords and your insides of your throats.
So a good friend of mine actually tried to hike Mount Whitney last year, and I'm sure she's going to do it again. If you're watching, hey, Christina, Mount Whitney's about 14,000 feet. She got up to about 12,000 feet, and the lack of oxygen kind of affected the hike.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's
quite a task.
It's something that, I've got a little bit of tolerance for. I can't explain it. I've seen people, I usually climb with 30-year-old ultra marathoners, and they kill me lower on the mountain because they're going 100 miles an hour and carrying twice what I'm carrying. But when the air gets thin, it seems like I can survive up there a little bit better than most. And so it's people get sick. Both my kids got sick climbing Kilimanjaro, and I've loved every minute of it.
So I was going to ask this earlier, but so you make it to the top of Everest, you spend your 20 minutes there, and now you're on the way back down. I just wondered what are you thinking? But it sounds like you're thinking, I hope I survive to get back to the bottom. But is there a point where you kind of reflect back and say, holy crap, I just climbed Mount Everest?
Yeah. And I had a hard time. One of the blogs I talk about, I had a hard time telling people I climbed Mount Everest, and they said, to base camp? And I said, no, to the top. And I felt guilty saying because I had a Sherpa that told me my knots were bad. Told me don't cross there. Told me to tie a safety line on. I fell in a crevice. I was dangling off of a little bitty carabiner in a 1/4-inch rope with 300 feet below me, and probably saved my life because he told me to make sure. And it was a 5-foot jump across a crack, a 4-foot jump that I could have made blindfolded, and ended up stumbling and falling in the crack. So going down, you're sloppy, you're weak, you're really, really trash from the summit push, and knowing the statistic that's where most people get it. I was really, really, really focused on my downhill descent, and I didn't get emotional when I got to the top. I was present, and I didn't really get emotional until the Sherpas. I walked into base camp, and you go around the Buddhist altar. It's called a stupa, and I walked around that, and they started beating the pots and pans for me, and I started crying like a baby. So. That's when I knew I was going to be safe, and I made it. So until then, and then I had cooks, I had a doctor in base camp. I had so many people that helped me get to the top of that. I felt really, really guilty saying I climbed Mount Everest, and I still do.
So, as a competitor, I know, I'm getting over too. I'm 40 years old now, but I still had that burn in my belly to do something. Now that you've summited Everest, do you still, is that fire to go back to Everest out, or is that something you would like to do again?
Yeah, I've got so many friends that I've met on the mountain, and so many, the Sherpa are friends of mine. I was planning on going back. In fact, 2 months ago, I was supposed to make another trip back, and I work with schools. I love talking to schools. When I got back in 17 or 16, I was emotionally jacked up. I saw those people die, begging me to help them get them off the mountain,
Yeah.
and I had to leave them there. So I needed something, and it was talking to school kids, and I still do that today. And it was it was something that this last season I was going to go up the mountain, up the Coomba Valley, and meet with and bring letters from school kids and get the kids up at the mountain to write letters back to them.
Yeah.
I ended up, it's a long story, but I ended up, my hip was trashed. I've been climbing for the last year and a half off steroid shots, and I had a hip replacement instead of going back to Everest. And so I had to cancel that, and a surgeon told me that if I let him replace my hip, he'd have me climbing by April. So I had a hip replacement, and I was supposed to go to Denali in June, and my permits got canceled. So I'm going to climb a mountain. They may get a little bit smaller as they come, but there's always going to be a mountain for me to climb. And I don't care.
Can I just go ahead and say you're insane? Like,
my wife says that.
I'm gonna say what everybody's thinking right now.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're still married, by the way.
Yeah, I got a good woman.
Well,
She
Gary,
climbs with me too.
What now?
She climbs with me too. It's just
Oh, okay.
she's not going to sleep on the ground. She's not going to sleep in a tent.
All right. She's got
And there
rules.
better, yeah, there better be something a little bit better than a Holiday Inn at the bottom of the mountain.
Gary, have you ever hiked the Appalachian Trail?
I've done segments of it, and you know, I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and I'm not retired yet, but I'm getting close there. It takes a lot of time commitment.
Yeah.
I'm not a very good camper. I don't know how to put a tent up very well, and so I can manage, but Appalachian Trail is a lot of logistics, managing of logistics, and it's just long days and repetitive day after day after day. And I'm wanting, after I finish the 7th summit, I had so much fun in Antarctica, dragging a sled and trekking across the ice. I would like to extend that to go all the way to the North and South Pole, and that's kind of something that I've got on my radar. And it's called I think they call it the expedition or the Explorers Grand Slam, to do all 7 summits in both poles. And I had so much fun in Antarctica, which I didn't think I would, because it's so remote and so harsh, but it was the most beautiful place I think I've ever seen.
Well, if you ever decide to do the Appalachian Trail and you make it through New England, look me up. You got a place to stay. Maybe we'll do some parts of it together.
Yeah, that's on my list. My list is long, and my years are getting shorter. So.
Well, I was going to ask you, Gary, is there a favorite mountain that you just love to climb? I mean, maybe, Everest, of course, is the big one. I mean, do you have one that's just your favorite?
I love going to Colorado. I've climbed about half the 14ers in Colorado. And just, I know them like the back of my hand. And the Collegiate Peaks, the Front Range, I love going out there, and every one of them is a different experience. Probably my favorite, Antarctica was really cool. You climb mountains for multiple reasons, and one is to experience the mountain. All mountains are different. They may be rocky and harsh, or they may be like a lunar sandy desert landscape, or just a block of ice. And so you experience, the nature and the power of that mountain. You also do it, each mountain's on a different continent and a different state. You do it because of the culture that's surrounded by that mountain. and you do it for a challenge to accomplish something, a sense of accomplishment. And those are the three things that kind of push me along, and those are why I climb them. And my favorite one probably is Kilimanjaro. It's the biggest freestanding mountain. You walk up to the bottom of that thing, and as you're looking 19,000 feet straight up, where like when you start really the technical climb in Everest, you're at 18,000 feet, and you climb to 29,039 feet. So you stand at the bottom of Kilimanjaro, you're looking up 19,000 feet, and you start out with monkeys barking at you in a rainforest, and then you get above the tree line, and you got the rocks, and then you get up to where you're having to scramble on boulders, and then once you get into the bowl, it's a volcano, it's an old volcano. Then you got ice, so you experience so many different flavors of mountaineering, and I'd say the culture around it, the porters or guides I had carried just tremendous loads, and they were so happy. They would sing and dance, and they would make you sing and dance along with them. And the culture part of Kilimanjaro, probably, I would say that was one of my favorite climbs.
Cool. Hey, Gary, I've actually got JD, you got a question from somebody that's watching right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, what's your advice for people trying to climb bigger mountains with higher altitudes with such high barriers to entry, like high cost?
That's my friend, Gary. That's Christina.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways. I used to run, you talk about marathons. I used to run a lot of those, and my wife would qualify and she would be able to go for free, and I would have to fundraise my way into them. There's some, if you're really good or have a good story around it, North Face sponsors a lot of people. There's a lot of sponsorships. If you're into social media, podcasting, if you've got a good following, this influencer thing is for real. My daughter makes a living at it right now, and I quit griping at her to tell her to get a real job because she makes more money than I do now. So get a sponsor, lean on friends. I'm amazed at these 30-year-olds that give up. I couldn't do it. I had 4 kids. I had a job. I had a company to take care of. I couldn't do it till I was in my mid 50s. These young guys will sell their car before they go, and they don't own a thing just to climb the next mountain. So I have a lot of passion and love for it, but I wouldn't go to that level. I would look for sponsorship. I would look where carry someone's back, get the car dealership or the coal mines to sponsor you. Everybody wants a story, and when you come back to you'll speak to those guys. It's good for both you and them to hear about something other than, I'm from Union County, Kentucky, and something other than what you hear in Union County, something a little bit different. So that's my advice. It's an expensive hobby, but you don't have to go expensive. You can go to Colorado, and those mountains are all free. And you can climb 14,000 foot peaks, and there's 58 of them till you're blue in the face. So and in the East Coast, you got you've got some really, really good mountains, got some good technical climbing along the Appalachian chain. So, you don't have to go for a big mountain to enjoy it. I enjoy the little ones as well as I do the big ones.
Anything else on Facebook, Jimmy, you want to know?
No, I don't have any other questions. Are we ready to move on to Amazing Race, or do you guys have more questions about?
Eric does, I'm sure.
I just had one question.
Just kidding.
I know you ran about a dozen or so, or actually a baker's dozen worth of marathons.
Mm-hmm.
Today's actually the 20th anniversary of my running the Big Sur Marathon in California.
Yeah.
And it was just an amazing experience, because for the first few miles you're running through the Piper State Forest, and then you see a small speck of light, and as you get closer and closer to it, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the second you come out of the forest, it's just like the whole world opens up, and you see the Pacific coast and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was just like an amazing moment in my life, because when I ran that race, that was my mom, who passed away the previous summer. And it was a very cathartic experience. What was your favorite marathon to run?
I love New York. It was one of those where my wife qualified. She's still a 3 hour and 40-minute marathon runner. And I usually am in the back with the guys that have got amputees and stuff like that. and I'm hanging with those guys. But New York City, he ran all through all the boroughs, all 5 boroughs. It was good. It kind of had a New York type of, usually you got people clapping and blowing, beating drums. And you go through Brooklyn, and then you got some guy sitting outside of the bar. He said, "Come on, you got your name on your bib." They said, "Come on, Gary, pick it up. You can do better than that." It's kind of like it was a different vibe, but I loved it. Boston, we had a nor'easter blow in the 111th Boston Marathon, and it rained 4 inches during the race. It was miserable.
I grew up in that area, so I remember.
Yeah, so it was. I've enjoyed them all. The marathon running, the race is a celebration. The training is painful, but when you're ready, if you've done all the proper training, the race is a celebration. And so they were all fun. I'm looking out at Nashville right now, and I've done the country music marathon 5 times, and that was one of my favorites too. That's since been canceled. So,
along with everything, so let's kind of move on. Let's talk about another form of racing. You guys, you and your daughter, I think her name was Mallory, right? We're on the Amazing Race, and I just want to know how that even came about. Like, how does one end up on the Amazing Race? I've always wondered that.
Well, there's 80,000 applicants every year that applied to go on the Amazing Race, and they've got a casting group that they want the right personalities to fit together. And my daughter was Miss Kentucky at the time, and she was runner-up in Miss America in 2009. And they asked her to go on Survivor. Same casting director that did the race did Survivor. And she turned them down. She said, "No, I said, I've been starving to death for a year as Miss Kentucky. There's no way I'm going on an island and starve for another 40 days. So they said, "Well, go get a partner and come back and we'll interview you for the race." So she came and got me, and we flew to Los Angeles and interviewed, and they picked us. They said, get your passports in. We're leaving in 2 weeks. And they got my passport, and they gave me 5 vaccinations, sent me home to pack my bags and come back for the race. But along the way, I don't know why I did. My daughter is very outgoing. She's the one that's a blogger and influencer, and she's writing a book right now, Mallory Ervin. And the casting director said, "Your daughter is the casting director's best. It's our dream." And I don't know why I asked it, but I said, "She's your dream. What am I?" He said, "Oh, you're our worst nightmare." He said, you mumble when you talk. You're not that good looking. You got a big belly. She went on a litany of reasons why that was her worst nightmare. So
one reason was good.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I can tell you that. But we had so much fun on the race. We ran from the day we started, and how it works is every week somebody gets eliminated. Usually that's a 3-day window on the race. And then you go to a place called Elimination Station. You got to sit there for a month if you get eliminated. Well, the first season we made it, and nobody knows this, but there's always five couples running the race. So when we got beat in Oman, and we were kicked off the race, but they said, "Well, we need you to finish running the race all the way to Los Angeles because we don't want nobody to know who's still in the race and who's not." So we got to run the race all the way through Bangladesh, Korea, China, into Los Angeles. So we felt that we ran the whole race. And then the second season, we made it to the finals, and we should have won it. We won 5 of the 11 legs, and we were 5 minutes out of the finals, and we got lost in a cab in Miami. The cab driver didn't know where the Florida Keys were. So it's kind of, I know I answered a lot of questions there, but it was one of the most fun things I ever did. I was gone for 6 weeks, came back, was home for 2 weeks. They said, they call us back. We were voted fan favorites that season. And they said, hey, we're having an all-star season called Unfinished Business. Can you come back in a few weeks and do it all over again? And so we packed our bags and took off again.
I'm sure you got called back because of you and not your daughter.
Yeah, it's absolutely the case. They made sure I understood that too.
Your daughter's amazing, and I got to ask you, obviously, your daughter is definitely, in ways, a duplication of you, because I remember reading in your profiles that you both have a stubborn streak.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as the stubbornness went, like during that journey, how did you crack one another's stubbornness, and how was the bonding experience of that whole thing both times?
Yeah, she was the oldest of all 23 grandkids. We still live on the same farm that she grew up on. And, when she was 7 years old, I taught her how to shoot a gun and fish. And she shot her first deer at that age. And so she wasn't a pageant girl. And it wasn't until she was in college. She was a really good singer, and she was very talented. And it wasn't until she was in college that she even tried out for it. And it wasn't until the third year she won it. But she was determined. It's similar to my mountain climbing. She set and focused on a goal, and she kept after it until she achieved it. And, she may have fell short of Miss America, but she loved traveling to the high schools and as Miss Kentucky and talking to the school kids. She visited 300 schools in Kentucky and loved every minute of it. So we got along okay on the race. After we were on it off and on for 6 months, and we had to be in the same camera frame. We had to be in the same bed at night, and I don't know if any of y'all got daughters. It's real cool until they get about 13. And when they get to teenagers, then they don't like their dad anymore. They like their mama better. And when they get out of college, it's kind of the same way. They come back to you after a while, but she was so glad not to be in the same camera frame or bed. One thing about being that close to your daughter, I knew what I looked like every morning. Dad, your hair looks like hell. I knew what I smelled like. I knew how much noise I made that night. So I got a full report every morning about, you're not going to wear that, are you? So it was fun. I'm real close to my daughter still today. And it was a great experience.
Jimmy, Jason, you guys got daughters, so.
Well, yeah, I was actually going to ask Gary if we can have a father-to-father conversation here. I have 2 daughters, and both are interested in pageants.
Mm-hmm.
And to this point, I've actually resisted it. I haven't agreed to it yet. And I just wondered, you're a dad, had a daughter, was Miss Kentucky, ended up runner-up, Miss America. Just to another dad, is it a good lifestyle? I mean, is it something that I should, promote or, hope that they get into?
So I tell everybody I coached 2 kids to be state champions and 2 daughters to be Miss Kentucky's, and I see them all as the same. I learned more about dresses and makeup and the way they should wear their hair than I did about a wrestling move that I taught my boys. My daughters were old. They taught me a lot about fashion. They taught me what it would take to win, and it's just the same as wrestling. You plan to win, so and it's such a great experience for them. You got 1 girl out of 30 that's going to win that, and the valuable lesson is learning how to lose, probably more than is learning how to win and it teaches you got to sit up there and smile, and you got to sit in front of a group of people and and compete. It's no different than being on a wrestling mat with a wrestler across the line from you. And I saw it as the same, so I embraced it. I was a pageant dad. I was one of those guys, kind of like Honey Boo Boo, and where I'd sit and I would critique, which she didn't much care for. But I don't like that dress. I don't like this. I thought you were flat on your song. But it's like it's no different to being a wrestling coach.
Gary, Mama Jean Ervin.
That's right.
Well, I am a dance dad extraordinaire. I have two daughters, and I always tell everybody if I would have had boys, I would have been all about sports because I'm all into that. But I have two girls, and so I go to every dance competition. I know more about ballet than I ever dreamed I would. I know dance moms. I like dance moms. I ain't gonna lie.
So how do you do with boyfriends right now?
Well, mine are 13. I'm actually entering that time, Gary, where what you were just talking about, I'm no longer cool.
Yeah.
And they don't really want to talk to me so much anymore. They're just now my oldest one's 13. So
yeah,
He's 14.
I didn't do good with boyfriends.
14. Yeah, she's 14.
I thought we've been through this, Jimmy. She's 14, bro.
For her birthday.
So can you tell us any kind of behind the scenes stuff, Gary, like from Amazing Race? Like, what is production like? I mean, so you're running the race, and is it all filmed in like a day and then you go somewhere and hang out till the next day, or is it 2 or 3 days in between? How does that kind of work?
Well, it varies. Some segments will be a day, and you race from pit stop to pit stop, and that could be a week. The All-Star season that we did, we started in Los Angeles at a wind farm, and our first clue was to fly to Australia and then we got to Australia and we had to find a big sailing ship and find a clue on it. And then we had to swim with white sharks and solve a puzzle underwater. And then we had to take a sailboat across the Sydney Harbor. None of us knew how to sail. And that leg took 5 days to finish. And so you get to a pit stop. And when you get to the pit stop, they take the mics off you and they turn the camera off and they separate you from the other teams. They don't want any action going on that is not filmed. So most of the race is filmed live, and it looks like on TV it's just you and my daughter, but there's a cameraman, a sound guy, there's a producer kind of hanging around, and then there's security kind of in some of these places in Ghana, Africa, and Russia. We were in some pretty shady spots, and so there's people around you all the time, and you're not as isolated, but they help you none at all. You hop into a cab, you got to they got to film you, and they're all out there. You got to tell the cab, go, go, go. And the cab starts driving off, and you say, stop, 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 because you got to load up your film guy and the sound guy. So you walk up to a ticket counter and you say, I need 2 tickets to St. Petersburg, Russia. And they want that for the camera. And he said, no. I need 4 tickets. I got to bring these 2 guys with me. So you get like $100 and you starve to death. I lost 17 pounds the first season because that's the last thing you spend money on is food.
Yeah.
And you have unlimited airline tickets with the credit card from the cameraman. So you spend $30,000 on airline tickets, and you couldn't buy. We would panhandle in airports for money. So it was that bad. But it was, you got to see some parts of the most beautiful parts of the world. I was dropped on the Matterhorn out of a helicopter and had to dig up a body in the snow. And it was in China. I was on Jade Mountain. I climbed Mount Fuji, and had to dig through a rice paddy for rubber frogs. So I danced the samba in Brazil after I got a full body wax on national TV with 12 million people watching me.
All right, I'm going back and watching it
now. My daughter telling me quit screaming. Why would anybody want to do that?
Jason, I bought one of those for your birthday.
Yeah.
I'm getting it for my girlfriend's birthday. No, so I'd be remiss if we let you go without asking you about your coal mine experience. You said you work underground now. So you work on a strip out in East Kentucky or West Kentucky?
I worked underground. No, I worked Peabody Coal Mines, Camp One, and it was back when they mined conventional coal. But now they got the miners and continuous miners. And I worked on a crew of it was 8 to 12 people then, and I was the shooter. So I shot. A driller would drill my holes, and I would set the charges and shoot the dynamite. At 18 years old, I got to blow stuff up. It was the greatest job I ever had in my life. But it's, I knew it wasn't going to be my lifelong career, but I loved every minute. I worked as a wrestling coach and an grad assistant in college. It was assistant coach for a year, and ended up coming back, and I couldn't get back on coal mines, and ended up in the cable business, and which was the best move I ever made. So it was just fate. But I love the coal mines and still love talking to miners about mining, although it's altogether different. It's continuous miners. And I was a union coal miner. I worked at a UMWA card, and most of the mines now in the county are all non-union. So it's changed a lot. The methods that we used to mine was a lot more people involved and a lot less equipment. And then, it's just
a lot of timbers.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot of timbers. We don't set timbers hardly ever anymore.
Oh, you don't? You just drill the roof bolts?
I'm a pinner, man. I'm a pinner, man.
Okay.
What we use now is a resin boat. We put the glue in the boat.
That's all we used was resin boats.
Okay.
Big old piece of rebar with a little header on it. And sling glue everywhere.
Yeah. It's not as bad anymore. They've come a long way, I'm sure, but we don't hardly ever set timbers, hardly ever. My dad was like, I wasn't going to. He stopped mining in 1983. He was like, I wasn't going to coal mines and didn't set timbers everywhere.
Yeah, timbers. Well, I was on a timber crew one summer, and we timbered rail barred across all the tracks. So we'd have to get back, and then we got on rail cars, and we'd go in 42-inch coal, and we'd drive back to where you got to your unit. So that was a fun job.
Yeah, it's a different world than what people imagine it to be, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And in the brotherhood too. I knew more about you didn't recognize anybody once you got out of the coal mine.
No, I've done that. I mean, like, who's that? Hey.
And then everybody had nicknames, so you didn't know what by their real name.
The worst nicknames of all time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to repeat any of them on there.
No.
JD, do you have a nickname?
No.
No. not that you're going to tell on here.
Not one I would divulge anyway.
I need to ask my wife's stepdad what his nickname was. He was a master electrician for the Maribel mines.
If he was an electrician, his nickname was Lazy. That's what his nickname was.
Nothing but lazy, believe me.
All right, Jimmy, I think we're good, man.
Well, I actually had another question here real quick from one of the viewers. And this is back to the mountain climbing. And it says, can a novice mountaineer climb a mountain such as Mount Rainier without a guide, service, or do you suggest it?
If you do your homework and go in there properly trained, you can. I would say a novice, Rainier's it's a weather mountain. It can get dangerous. And the experience is knowing when to turn around. Not knowing, it's not knowing how to tie all the knots and stuff. It's how to read the conditions around you and how to monitor your body. So I always, and I still climb with a guide sometimes. I'll go to a 14er and I'll get a guide. If it's a technical one where I've got to use a lot of rock climbing and ropes, I'll get a guide that knows the route. So, it's all about the cost. Do something that, the Front Range is really, really good. There's a lot of people on it. You're not going to get lost. So you can climb that one. But Rainier's a different. It's a pretty difficult. It's a technical mountain. So I would go with a group. You can go by yourself. Just hang out at base camp and find somebody that's going to be traveling with you, and go with somebody that's got some experience.
I think the prominence for Rainier is about 8,000 feet, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it can get some weather on it. But any mountain can kill you. I hate to use the term. Everybody says you conquered Everest. I didn't conquer it. It let me up. It could have kicked my butt at any time, and they're just so powerful, and it can turn so bad so quickly. So I don't like to use the word I conquered anything. It allowed me to climb it. So I treat them with great respect. It's fun to climb alone. I climbed all winter. I've climbed probably 8 days a month for the last 6 months until I had my hip surgery, and I climbed by myself. But I carry a satellite phone. I carry good communications. I carry a good layered gear in case I get bad weather, a good hard shell. You got to have enough experience in being in bad enough weather to really know how to react to it. So I would tell that person, guides, you can get a good guide for $200. He's to take you up at the best thing is find a group of friends to climb with and share the mountain together.
Gary, I can't thank you enough for coming on here. I have enjoyed this. You've had a very interesting life, and it's just been awesome to sit here and get a chance to talk to you.
Same here.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on.
And if you ever get to East Kentucky, come by. We'll get you a beer.
All right. Hey, what's your favorite bourbon? All right, just add bourbon.
Oh,
the bourbon of choice.
I might be able to find some bourbon. We'll see.
What's your favorite? What's your go-to?
Right now, I'm drinking a lot of 1792. Small
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like Blanton's. If you've ever drank Blanton's, I'm a big Blanton's guy. I love it.
What do you drink?
I got a bottle of Angel Envy. I've gotten kind of hooked on that. I like Four Roses. There's so many good bourbons being put out now. So but kind of Angel's Envy is my go-to now.
Nice. Eric, drink anything? What's your
Geez, I really like Woodbridge Reserve. But I'm kind of getting more into bourbons as I go. Like I visited a distillery in New Hampshire called Smoky Quartz, and it was a really, really cool, very smooth bourbon. But I'd really like to try the bourbon that was brought up in the Mitch Please book, Jimmy Don, at that bourbon festival in Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, boys, do you want to tell him or should I tell him?
Old Barton something.
Should I tell him or you guys want to tell him? You Kentucky boys want to tell him or should I tell him?
Go ahead and tell him.
They don't make bourbon outside Kentucky. So let me tell you.
Yeah, it's what called whiskey.
Yeah, that's whiskey. That's not really bourbon. All right, guys. So, Gary, we'll let you be, man. We appreciate it. And then from myself, from Eric, from JD, we thank you guys for watching. You can catch our podcast. We record every Sunday. It launches from the Podbean app. Of course, you can find us on iTunes, on Spotify. Obviously, you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And as we always end the show, no matter how bad your week's been or no matter how bad your day's going, if you just add bourbon, it always gets a little bit better. Thanks, guys, for coming on.